Hey everyone, it's Nina. So today I'm going to talk about the human design deconditioning process. So you may have heard this term being thrown around the more that you learn more about your human design, and you may be wondering what that really means or what that entails. And it's obviously different for everyone, but I'm going to share my own process and how it's very similar to like a spiritual awakening. Just you use human design as almost like a guidebook or as like this blueprint to go off of to go through your deconditioning or your awakening journey or your growth or whatever you want to call it. So I actually did a video on my spiritual awakening, which I laugh at that now because what I have gone through in the past year is like, oh my God, that was like a true spiritual awakening. Like what I went through in the past was like small potatoes. So I will share more about that journey and the growth that has come out of that and how my entire perspective of the world has shifted towards myself and towards other people, and how human design has been like a very steady like light post for me to kind of follow or like come back to as I go through this process, to come back to a place of authenticity and to really get to know myself. And also Gene Keys has been very huge in that as well, as far as like relationships and helping me to see other people as like my greatest gifts, to bring me back to myself, to bring me back to a place of wholeness and home within myself. And that's actually something really big for 6 lines as well. So as a 4-6, I'm on the roof right now. I'm in my mid-30s, and it's been a process to get here, like after my Saturn return. And the Saturn return was kind of like a kickoff, and it was like a ramping up to come into this deconditioning process. So I was deconditioning before I even came to human design. Now I just have the language, the human design language, to use to explain this journey. So with human design, deconditioning is used as a way to explain, you use your chart to say, here's my strategy and here's my authority. And you look at all of the not self aspects of yourself, and there's this basically expansion of self-awareness of yourself for all of like the great stuff and then also the shadow stuff, which is so fun to look at. And everyone's different in the way they experience their deconditioning journey. For me, I would say it started off as like a bunch of micro awakenings where I would just be sitting and talking about human design and reflecting and contemplating like the open heart center and just saying, where is this not self showing up in my life? And then it would be like this mind explosion of holy shit, like I'm literally not living a life that I like or want. And it's the not self of the heart. And then kind of taking that and saying, where am I, operating from this not self in my life? And then literally letting go and letting those identities and those parts of me crumble to the ground. So deconditioning can be compared to experiencing multiple deaths, like literally thousands of deaths of your old self, who you thought you were, and belief systems, and just basically an old life. And I think anyone who has gone through a true deconditioning process, they will tell you like it is not for the faint heart. Because you give up so much because you realize you've been operating from a place that is not who you are. And it's not like we're trading one identity from another. It's just that we're learning how to tap into our bodies and our authorities, and we're allowing that to guide us versus allowing our mind to guide us. And obviously we're human, and we're never going to come to a place of perfection where we're not listening to the mind and we're not being conditioned by our environment, because quite honestly that's kind of impossible, especially with transits and people we're around and just the energies of where we're at and where we're staying. So this isn't necessarily about how you can be this perfect person and be like your perfectly aligned self and like the best version of yourself, because again, that's just not self-thinking where you're like, hey, I'm going to be the best version of myself. Well, that's the mind saying there's a best version of yourself when you are just who you are, and that's it. And so with all of that being said, I'm going to kind of walk you through what my process has been. like I said, everyone is different, but I want to share, especially as an emotional being, an emotional manifester, and a quadrite who has been through so much, like in my life, suppressing my emotions and basically going through a process where they all came up at once. And the path that I took in order to come to that place of basically surrendering to looking at all of that and being radically honest with myself about all of everything that basically came up. And I'm not going to share like personal intimate details about some things just because I'm not going to speak about, you know, other people in my life. Not that I want to like protect anyone or anything like that. It's just, you know, this is a personal journey and I have experienced every single emotion up and down on the spectrum. And so I look back on that and I kind of laugh because like I'm human, and I really want to share this journey because I don't think people understand like how difficult it can be. Like it got to the point where I was like, I couldn't physically be in my body. Like there was so much pain and so much emotion coming up, and I understood the beauty of it and I knew exactly what was going on. But if I didn't have like the spiritual or background or human design context or of like what was going on with me, I probably would have ended up in a mental hospital. And I think that there are a lot of people going through this process where they're kind of awakening up to the fact like, this is all an illusion and, you know, something's not right. I'm not happy with myself. I don't like who I am. How do I get out of this life that I've created? And there's this, you know, that ego wants to hold on to this life that you've created because it's comfortable. But it's also incredibly uncomfortable to be there and know that there is a completely different way of living. Your soul knows that. And so everyone's process is going to be a little bit different, and your soul is going to wake up in the time that, you know, it's ready, whether it's this lifetime or another lifetime. And maybe this is just, you know, building blocks for the next lifetime. Again, no right or wrong to any of that. But I'm just going to kind of start with a little bit of a backstory here. So, you know, at the beginning of my Saturn return, I didn't know about human design. I basically had moved to Florida. I left my entire network as a fourth line. I left my entire network, everything in Ohio, and moved down to Florida with my partner at the time, and my contract ended, so I was struggling to find work, and my open heart was like, had such low self-worth back then, and I just struggled to meet people down there, and I became severely depressed. And I got to the point where I was just sitting in the shower and I was crying. I think I was like 28 or 29 at the time, and I was like, I will literally do anything. I was like, I will do drugs like that, like not like drugs in the sense that like I'm gonna go like party and whatever. It was more of like I wanted to work with plant medicine because I had heard about it and how it could change your life and all of these things. But I was scared because I was like, I don't want to lose my mind. And while saying all of this, I also want to add, this is not necessarily the path for everyone. I'm just sharing this for myself. I think that the way that I worked with plant medicine and the way that a lot of people work with plant medicine, it can be incredibly overwhelming. And if I could go back and do it all over again, I would do it completely different. I would use them in I would work with them in like a much smaller context and smaller groups or one-on-one with people who could guide me versus having it being like this really big, overwhelming experience. So anyways, that was a side note. So anyways, I was sitting in my shower crying, being like, I hate my life. I hate myself. What is the point of anything? Like, in like the lowest low. And a week or so later, I went to a sound healing event and someone was talking about plant medicine, and I was like, I need to go talk to that guy. And so I went to talk to him, and he's like, hey, we're doing a San Pedro ceremony and this weekend, you're welcome to come. And I was like, okay, like I'm there. And that was kind of like the beginning of my journey, where I went and it literally just began the process of cracking my heart open and liberating me to begin to express my emotions. Because after that, I began dancing and I began writing and I began to tap a little bit more into my creativity. And so after that, I started going to a couple of ayahuasca ceremonies, and they were very profound and they expanded my consciousness, but like nothing in my life really changed, or like if it did, it was very short term. And then I would be left feeling like, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. Why am I not getting this? And I honestly think my personal lesson and journey with plant medicine was that I need to stop going to external things to try to fix me or heal me, and I need to do the work myself. But it took me a couple of years to get there. So with that being said, like I went to Costa Rica and I lived in Washington and did all these different ceremonies in Cambo and San Pedro and ayahuasca and, you know, like a bunch of other plant medicines, and worked with a lot of shamans and did private healing ceremonies with them and worked with rapé and like all these different things. And it was beautiful and magical. And I honestly think that was a process of me slowly beginning to deconstruct and strip away more layers to see the shadows. So it was almost like this resistance. Like I knew something was off and I was like fighting to find out like what was going on within me and why I wasn't happy and why I didn't like myself, but not necessarily knowing how to do it. But there still being an underlying fear of letting go of these identities and this life that I had built. And so it was definitely this huge process of slowly deconstructing until my soul felt like it was ready in the beginning of my 30s, because that was kind of like a very rocky time period where I went back and forth with my partner at the time, and there was a lot of codependency and attachments there that I had to look at after everything had broken off, and I just wasn't ready to look at it, basically. And so it got to the point where you know, I was like, I'm kind of done with plant medicine. Like, I just need to figure this out. But I was almost like I was like waiting. I was like, what the hell? Like, what do I do? What do I do with my life? What's next? What's the point of anything? And just being on the right angle cross of consciousness, I'm like, I want to go, you know, impact the collective consciousness, but I want to do it in a way that's like has depth to it. I'm not going to go do these surfacey things anymore, which is what I was doing in the past. And I was trying to follow and do what everyone else is doing. And as a manifester, that obviously does not work because we're here to pave our own path. And so it's been that process of coming back to myself and learning how to trust myself. And I was trying so hard. And I would like to say that, like, you know, the thing that really kind of set off like the biggest part of my journey over the past year and a half was, first of all, having the courage to break off an engagement to someone I was with for 5 or 6 years and really break that karmic pattern in that relationship that I had with that person. And once I did that, like once I had the courage to do that, it was like I energetically felt things really begin to shift, because it was like I made that decision. My soul was like, okay, she's ready. So about 6 months after that, I lost my job. And I was like, what the hell am I going to do? I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll travel. And I ended up packing my stuff in storage and booking a one-way ticket to Mexico, being like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I went out there and just was like, I'm going to jump around to these different cities. And it was kind of like my own eat, pray, love trip. And during that trip, I found a practitioner, a teal swan practitioner, and I started doing somatic work with her, somatic therapy with her, where basically you go into sensations in your body and you basically go into past trauma that's stored in your body and you feel it and you release it. And there's almost like this reprogramming aspect where you can go and you can do inner child work with it as well. And so it was like a lot of different types of therapies all rolled into one, and it was different every single every single week. So I've basically been working with this person for the past year. But when I first started working with her, it was every single week, and it was really intense. And that was like, there were so many shifts that kept happening every single week, every time I did that, because it was like I was starting to look at my shadows, and it got very, very intense. And I did a video that explains a little bit more about that teal swan process and things that I experienced. And again, I feel like all of these experiences that I was having was basically prepping me for the big bang, like this big explosion that happened when I returned back from Mexico. And so when I felt like it was time to return back to the US from Mexico, I was still like, you know, I wanted to settle down. Like I was just ready. I was so sick of living out of my suitcase, and that was just not the path for me. And so, with human design, you know, you're using everything as a blueprint. So during all of this time period, as I started to learn about human design, I began to basically live my life, and then go back and reflect on my chart and say, oh, okay, this is where the not self was, or these are things that I learned, or this actually doesn't match up, and this is where I followed my authority, and this is where I did not, and I listened to my mind. And so that's kind of how I use human design right now, is like I basically intake a lot of information about my chart, and then I look at my life and see like where that might apply, and then I'll go live my life. And I think this is especially connected to my chart as a 35-36. I need to experience things and go out and live my life, and then reflect, and then share with the collective basically what my experiences are. And so this is why you might see my human design videos come out in waves, because as a manifestor, I get my urges, and I feel compelled to share a video, and then I'll go into a rest cycle, and then I'll share, and or I'll go and I'll like basically live my life and have more adventures, and then after I come out of that, and I'll reflect, and I'll contemplate, and I'll find my learnings, and I'll grow, and then I'll do more videos when I feel that urge coming on to share again. So that's kind of like my process. So it's going to be a little bit different for everyone and how you use human design in that context. But so I've used that as kind of like this blueprint that I can reference and come back to and say, oh, here's something new and different I learned. Oh, that's where I was like falling into the not self with the Open G Center, and like all of these different things. And it's just been this really beautiful like reflection and learning tool for me to, like say like that I can reference to say like, oh, am I on not necessarily the right path, but like it gives me some sort of stability in this process. So this deconditioning journey is basically going in and expanding your self-awareness of yourself, and peeling back these layers of not self and starting to listen to your authority. Because honestly, you just need to know your strategy and authority. In my opinion, it's way more fun to really get into the depths of your chart and understand different aspects of it. But that's just me personally. But it really is like tapping into that authority. And, I'm about 3 or 4 years into my experiment or my deconditioning process. And I'm still learning about my emotional authority. And so having human design as like this context that I could use as I'm going through this process has been so incredibly like healing in a way, because it's showing me where all my shadow aspects are, but I've also used other tools on the path. And so it's not just like that one thing, but again, there's so much shadow work that comes with human design, and raw can be like very in your face and blunt. And that's like, to me, it was like what I needed at the time in order to start to purely peel back these layers and decondition or awaken or whatever, come back to myself, however you want to call it. But from there, the somatic therapy was helpful, especially as an emotional being, as an emotional authority, because most of my life, all of these emotions had been stuffed down and just not expressed. And they were just held so tightly in my body, and I was just very rigid, and I had all these chronic health issues, and I was just like, what the hell? I've done plant medicine, I've done every single diet out there, like I've done all these things. And until I started doing somatic therapy, that's when things started to shift and change. And over the past year, it has literally felt like me going from my mind is in control to being like, I'm literally taking it day by day, and I'm surrendering. It's literally like you're jumping into the river instead of like holding on to something and being like, I'm going to steer and control. It's more of like you just let go of the boat and you just float and you let the river take you. So to me, that's how it feels like the more that I go into my deconditioning process, where you really do become the passenger of your life, where you're just like, the mind can say, okay, I still want to control these types of things, but there's like this flip or the switch that flips, that you go from like being 51 or more % in mental control to now the body or your soul or whatever you want to call it is now 51 or more % in control, where you're just allowing that to lead you. And it's honestly like terrifying, because the mind is like, I don't want to let go of control, and it will fight till the end. I will tell you, it'll fight to the end. My mind still fights on so many different things, but that's the funny part of the trip, when you can go back and you can reflect on it and you're kind of like on the other end of it. So anyways, the actual part of letting go and surrendering has been like so weird, like, because you're like you're taught like, oh, we have free will or whatever. And I'm still kind of trying to figure out like that balance, or if there is even any balance with that. But that's like a whole nother story. So I'm going to continue on with my deconditioning story. So anyways, got back from Mexico and was trying to decide where I wanted to go. And again, I was 33, 34. And so kind of like the tail end of my Saturn return, like really coming onto the roof as a 6 sign and feeling those shifts within myself to be more aloof, to want to be more grounded. I just didn't want to travel anymore. And, wanted to settle down in Florida, but was like, I don't know, like maybe I'll go back to Mexico. I was still kind of relying on external things and people and attachments. And so it was hard for me to make that decision because I wasn't fully grounded within myself. And when I arrived back, basically something happened that completely shattered my heart, my world. It created so much cognitive dissonance within my mind, and I literally didn't get out of bed for a week. I barely ate for a month. And when it all happened, I got rid of most of my stuff in storage, packed the rest of my stuff in my car, and drove up to my dad's house. And that's when I didn't get out of bed for a week. And during that time period, I literally I died. I don't know how else to explain it, but I died. Because I was feeling so many emotions and so much was coming up that I was my mind literally felt like it was splitting apart. And I thought my body was going to split into a million pieces because I could not possibly hold that much grief and pain in my body. And and like I said earlier, if someone else was experiencing this, they might have, thought they needed to go to a mental hospital or something, or they felt really anxious. And as it was going on, I realized, I knew it was going on because I had this context. I was like, okay, this is a complete breaking down, an ego death, an identity death. And during that time period and the following 3 months, I think I cried every day for 3 months. And, I still have my moments 8 or 9 months later, but it was I went through a very big grief process because I was letting go. There's basically the death of a very big relationship in my life that I had a lot of attachment and codependency to. And so if anyone's gone through a divorce or they've been betrayed or things have happened that were very shocking to them, that was kind of my process, and that was a thing that I needed to awaken and come back to a place of wholeness within myself. I had to have that hurt and that grief happen to me, while at the same time it also triggered basically a door opening of all of my shadows coming out, all of my skeletons coming out of my closet, and then me having to look at it all at once and being this is where I was an asshole and this is where I hurt people, and then feel the pain that I caused those people over and over and over again, until I finally realized I needed to learn how to forgive myself and give myself compassion. And that took a lot of time for me to be very gentle with myself. And during that time period, I was in the process of doing EFT tapping and my somatic therapy, and I was doing, basically 2 or 3 hours of Joe Dispenza meditations every single day. And I was doing EFT tapping, and I would do that for anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a day, really getting into deep-rooted belief systems to be this is becoming highly aware of where a lot of my not self was operating from, and then releasing that. And then on top of that, I was doing the Venus sequence, which I was journaling about and listening to the Gene Keys audios 3, 4, 5 hours a day. So I wasn't really working at the time, so I had the space and the time to do this, to basically have this breakdown and go on this journey. And the Venus sequence literally changed my life. And so if anyone's familiar with the Gene Keys, it's kind of this, I don't want to say it's an add-on to human design, but you have your 64 gene keys, which are in alignment with the 64 gates, and all of that goes together. And to me, it's more of the feminine or the yin to human design. Human design is you have, Ra giving his delivery that's kind of a harsh and in your face and very blunt. And then you have Richard Rudd, who's this poet, and the way that he speaks, it's oh my gosh, it's so beautiful and soft and compassionate. And it's an easier place to land because it goes through the shadow and then the gift and then the city of each gate. And it takes you through the sequence in the Venus sequence, and it shows you that your relationships are your biggest gifts and your biggest reflections of like your own growth and what you're avoiding within yourself. And so I spent hours every single day, and I would go for a walk for an hour or two and listen to those audios, and I would just sit and I would contemplate, and I would sit with that pain, and I would sit with that uncomfortableness every single day, and I would cry, and I would just be with myself. And there was so much inner child work and reparenting that went with all of that. And like I said, this went on for months. Like, this still happens in some capacity, but I'm much more well equipped now. Like, if I'm feeling emotional, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna cry, and I'll cry, and there's less of an attachment of like why I'm crying, and it's just more of like, oh, okay, it's just something that's coming up to be released, and then a couple of minutes later I'll be like singing and dancing. So I basically had to go through this process in order to learn how to handle my emotions, because I didn't know how to before. And as an emotional being, that's like so huge. And you know, it wasn't like, oh, after a couple months I was good to go. No, it was like there were still like awakenings happening even when I was like, all right, like I got it, like I went through this big thing, because I knew this was a very pivotal moment in my life to make changes. And I was also like reading Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, in order to basically learn how to be more intentional with my life and what I was putting my focus and my intention on, versus just being like, oh, la la la, I'm just gonna, you know, let life, you know, take me wherever, which as a quad right, technically, like that's, you know, one way that we are meant to really live. But we do live in this 3D reality. And the fact of the matter is, like, there needs to be some sort of balance. And I almost feel like I'm like a bridge, like a gift. And in my specific chart is that intuitively, I feel like I'm a bridge between this, like, this world of this 3D world going into the 5D, if whatever language you want to use, but basically people going through this process, and I had to go through that myself. And so I feel like it's necessary to still operate with some structure in my life. And so I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. So anyways, I was basically creating this map of like being like, these are my goals and these are things that bring me joy. And throughout that process, I was still going through this grieving process and letting go. And I was like really hard on myself, because I was like, why the hell is this taking so long? And I was just like, just kind of like sick of it. I was sick of being caught up in the old and the past, and like not being able to let go of things, but this was just my own journey. And again, I was having these mini awakenings. And a couple months ago, I got to the point where like I was driving and I had a complete breakdown again, like 6 or 7 months after my first like so-called breakdown. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I literally had to pull over into a beach parking lot, and I was sitting in my car and sobbing, and like noises were coming out of my mouth that I was like, oh my God, like just all these things were releasing from me. And at the core of it, I was like, who am I? What am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life? What is the purpose of anything? And even more shadows were coming up where I was like, I'm still using this person or manipulating this person or hurting this person. And it was just like this very like, it was almost like the final like crumbling of the ego, where I realized like, I don't know who I am or what I want. And I started to panic a little bit, because I was like, what am I going to do? Who am I? Where do I go? Where do I live? I didn't even know where I was going to live, and was basically living out of my car for like 6 months at that point, and staying with family and staying in Airbnbs and things like that. But all my stuff was in my car, and I was staying with a family at the time. And I was just like, I need something. And it's basically in that moment of like breakdown, I was like, okay, like, I don't even know what I'm going to do tomorrow. Like, I don't even know how to move forward. And I was like, okay, well, what can I do in this moment? And in that moment, I was like, it came to me from inside that was like, just write. Like, I just need to write right now. And I was like, okay, right now, I'm going to go to a cafe and I'm going to write. And this is maybe like in February or something of this year. It's June right now. And I went there and I just wrote and I just channeled. And I got very clear about where I was operating from the not self and from my shadows, and said, okay, I'm going to get very clear. And these are the things that I feel like I'm not being consistent or committed to in my life. And this is where I feel like other people, like, instead of blaming other people and being like, this person didn't commit to me, or this person didn't do this, or they were this wrong, I was like, where am I not giving that to myself? And so I sat in that cafe and I said, this is where I'm committing to myself, and this is where I'm making my decision, and this is where I'm going to be intentional, and these are going to be my top 4 things that are a part of my main intention and my main like life vision or goal, which was basically a weaving of my incarnation cross and my gifts and my skills and things that really bring me joy. So it was like something more like a generalized intentional statement of like, I wake up every day and I'm like, is what I am doing aligned with this goal? And if it's not, then I change my character. I change who I am being in that moment to align with that goal. And then I have like my sub goals underneath that based on like how I want to show up and the person that I feel like I'm meant to be, because I have crumbled to such a place of like almost like nothingness. It's like literally like coming to a blank slate where you're looking at all of your belief systems and your identities, and then as you go through this deconditioning journey, all of those are like being crumbled over and over again. So it's like you try to create these new ones and you're like, nope, this was built off not self. This was built off not self. And then you have to go through that crumbling process again. And you get to that point where you're like, I'm just tired. Like, I don't even want to play that game anymore. I'm just going to be myself. And you really truly learn what being yourself means, because you learn how to set up boundaries with other people, with yourself, and you learn how to come from a place of authenticity, of just being like, I'm done putting these masks on. Like, if it means that I need to let go of these relationships, okay. If it means I need to let go of this job, okay. Like, I surrender, I'm done. And when you really reach that point, that's when things will start to really line up for you. And that has been my process of like really letting go of, like, even just the past few months, I've let go of a lot of relationships that, I thought were very authentic and very true. And that was, again, like more attachments and more not self. And the more that you are honest with yourself, the faster this process may happen for you, because the more that we cling to things, it's just going to really draw out that pain and that suffering that really doesn't need to be. So from all of that, I had my intentions and I had my goals, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I wrote down, I wanted to find this apartment. This is what I want with it. This is what I'm going to do. And these are the things I'm going to give my energy and my attention to. And I let go of it. I just said, if this is meant to be, it's just going to happen. And I ended up finding an apartment at a crazy deal, and that's actually unheard of. It's like a block from the beach, and it was in the perfect place, and it's this huge, beautiful space, and it felt good the moment I walked into it. I looked at all these other apartments, and when I walked in here, my open G was like, this feels really good. Like, energetically, it felt really good. It was close to the beach, it was in a quiet area, and I was like, okay, mark this off my list of things that I said that I wanted. And when I moved back here, I was like, I'm just going to get really quiet. And instead of going out and dumping more of my drama and going to external people for validation or asking for help with my so-called problems, I'm going to learn how to deal with this by myself on my own level. And so as an emotional being, that was part of my deconditioning process of like, I was slowly building up this strength and this knowledge and this inner knowledge of how to manage my own emotions and deal with my own stuff. So, it's finally gotten to the point where, again, like I mentioned, I'll like have these little mini cry sessions, or things will come up and I'll journal about it, or I'll do EFT tapping, or like I have my different tools, but it's just me managing me. It's like almost like I'm managing the inner child within myself, and I'm treating it with so much love and compassion, and there's absolutely no judgment for it. And so, I was talking to my mom the other day, and she's like, you're just coming back to your younger self. Like, you're learning how to be like little Nina again. And I was like, you're right. Like, I really am, because I basically have a playroom, and I paint, and I go for really long walks a few times a week, and spend time grounding in the beach on the sand by myself. And I go and I spend time intentionally with people that feel good for me. And I don't give people attention or time or energy that don't feel good to me. And, it is just what it is. Like, I just don't care anymore. Not that I don't love them. I love them, and I see them very differently. And they are just who they are, but it just doesn't feel right for me. And I'm honoring that. I'm learning how to honor that for myself. So this deconditioning process, it's like I said, I had to let go of literally an old life, this person, these identities of who I thought I was. I had to look at all of my shadows of where I was hurting people and how I was trying to put myself in a box. And the more I kept trying to do that, the more I kept hurting people. And until finally it was like this explosion, and I just had to let go of everything. And it's only when you can come to that place of like emptiness and like just nothingness, it's when you can really come from a place of like pure intention of how you are choosing to live your life and coming back to the purity of who you are, because you're clearing out all of that old stuff. And again, I'm not perfect. I definitely have my moments, and I'm human, and I still have emotions, and I'm still looking at belief systems where I'm like, oh, I'm kind of struggling with this today, but I approach it very differently. And, human design has been that one of the greatest tools for me in that deconditioning process. And also Gene Keys. Gene Keys was like so huge, because I went into the Venus sequence a couple years after I started studying human design, and it was at the perfect timing when basically my relationships like blew up in my face, and then I dove into and reflected and learned the art of contemplation basically. And it's been such a beautiful journey, and like I said, it's helped me to see the world in like such a different perspective, and it's taught me what liberation and freedom is. Like in all of my ceremonies, like my plant medicine ceremonies, like I was always like, oh, help me to surrender. I want to feel free. And it's like never what I thought it was. Like, be careful what you ask for, because it's never what you really think it is. I'm just laughing now because I'm like, oh honey, like, oh, past Nina, like you had no idea what you were asking for. But it's beautiful because, oh my God, like the gifts that come out of this. I will say, from the consciousness of like me in the past, if I had known what I had to go through and what I had to let go of, I don't think I would have gone through with it. Maybe I wouldn't have had a choice, but it's not an easy path. And I have clients that I work with that are going through their own awakenings, and they're having these breakdowns, and they're like, what's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. I'm crying all the time. And I'm like, no, like, this is amazing. Like, this is so beautiful. Like, this is where you learn how to sit with yourself and hold space for yourself, and how you learn how to really, truly be with yourself and love yourself on like such a deep level. And like I said, it creates this liberation that you don't even really understand what liberation is until you have nothing and you reach this point of nothingness in your life. And that is freedom, when you owe nothing to anybody. And I say that with your family, like you owe nothing to your family, you owe nothing to your friends, you owe nothing to your employer. Like, it's just you, and you get to make the decisions, and you get to choose where you're giving your energy. And of course it's going to be hard, but the more that you peel back these layers, you understand what sovereignty truly, truly is. And it is not allowing that external to have that control over you in the way that it did before, or at least like having the awareness that it's still there, but you're making a different decision to not be controlled by that, or to be manipulated by that, and then also to be manipulated by those inner shadows within you. You learn how to work with your shadows. It's not like you're killing off your ego. It's always going to be there. It's about learning how to play with your ego, and it's learning how to play with your shadows instead of allowing them to own you. And so part of this deconditioning process is like literally looking at every single one of your shadows and every single one of your fears in the face, and not backing down and saying, I love you and I accept you, and not backing down and standing firm in all of that. Because then you learn to fear nothing. You learn to fear nothing when you look at all of your shit and you look at all of it, so you know who you are. There's nothing to hide. And so that is how you can really show up in full authenticity to every single person that you meet, because you've looked at all your stuff. Well, I'm not saying all of it. Like, I have more stuff that I'm sure I can look up, but like, again, it's a lifetime process. But like, you can be honest with yourself, and when you are honest with yourself, that shows up more fully when you're interacting with other people and the choices that you make in your life, because you have nothing to hide. And those shadows and those things will still reside within you, but there's no judgment towards them. You learn how to work with them in a way that's not going to be manipulative or like is going to control you or hurt other people. you're aware of them and you can say, how can I work with this? And it's going to be different for everyone and your different shadows. And some of the times it's just accepting it and being like, okay, like this is a crutch in my life or whatever. And like being okay with that. And, you know, I feel like having that awareness and removing that resistance actually allows that thing to kind of fall away or not be so in control of or like prominent in your life. So, wow, this video is getting really long and there is so much more that I want to say about this, but I just wanted to share this deconditioning journey because it's not just like a one and done thing and you're like, oh, I got my chart and everything's love and light. And it's like, no. Like if you are really committed to, like your soul is committed in this lifetime to do some work and to have these lessons, you know, it's not just going to be an easy walk in the park. Like it's going to challenge you and it's going to break you and you're going to fall to the ground to your knees and you're going to burn in the ashes and you are going to be completely reborn as somebody else that you don't even recognize. And it is not for the lighthearted and it is not an overnight thing. It is something that builds on each of your growth experiences that you are taken through. And this takes months and years and in your entire life. And so like you hear people talk about going through like Kundalini awakenings and like all these things. And I'm like, oh my God, I would never wish that on anyone because there is so much integration that needs to happen because there are literally neurological connections in your brain or your mind that is shifting and changing, and the mind and the body needs time to catch up with that, to catch up with those new belief systems, to catch up with this new frequency that you're holding within your body. And it is a process, but I wanted to share my own journey thus far because I want people to know that they're not alone and they're not crazy. Because it can seem like you're going crazy and you can be like, what the heck am I doing? And it can be really, really scary. And so I've been so fortunate to have an amazing support system and friends that I can go to and a really great therapist that I go to that I can talk about these things, who has gone through this process herself. And that's where I learned a lot about my coping and like different tools that I can use in order to work through and manage things with myself, whether it's through contemplation or breath work or movement or tears or whatever. Like there's so many different infinite amount of possibilities and ways that, you know, you can help process all of these things coming up, especially as an emotional being. Because like I said, when all of those suppressed emotions came up for me last year, it was like so incredibly overwhelming. And like I said, I cried every day for months. And I'm not saying everyone's path is going to be like that, but it is a part of the process, especially if you haven't allowed yourself to feel for a very long time. And I just want you and anyone else watching this who may be going through something like this, that, you know, there's nothing wrong with you. There's not. It's okay that you're crying and these things are coming up and whatnot. And there are tools and there are people here to support you as you go through this process. And there is light on the other end of the tunnel. I'm like living proof of it. And I've had my own process and way of doing things. And that's actually part of, you know, how I do my work with my human design clients. Is I use that combination of human design and gene keys and inner child work and other modalities and breath work and everything as people go through their own awakening journey. It's because you're basically coming home to yourself, and it can feel very rocky at times, and people don't necessarily know how to do that, or they don't have the tools to do that, and they need that extra support. And so that's what I do, is I kind of guide people to that deeper place of understanding and to home within themselves. So just that like empowerment of, and it's not me saying this is how you need to do it. It's looking at the human design chart and saying, oh, okay, based on this is the route that we're going to go down, and we're going to try these different things. And so it's a little bit different for everyone. And so I feel like I'm finished now for right now. I wrote like all these things, and I'm like, I'm going to talk about these things. And I didn't even get to like any of these things that I wanted to talk about in the deconditioning journey. So maybe I'll just do another video, but this is pretty long. And thank you to all who stayed around and listened. I hope that this was helpful in some way, and maybe it was validating, or maybe it was helpful just for you to be like, wow, I'm actually really not crazy. So hope you enjoyed all of this. If you've experienced any of this, feel free to leave a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, because when I'm in flow, I'm posting lots of videos, whether it's human design or yoga or both. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.